Hey, welcome those of you that are online, those in person. So you probably think that we are, in our brilliance, we invited Beth to come speak tonight because we said, now who has a large extended family so that we could have more people come to listen. And we said, oh, Moritakis, why not, But we're not that smart, actually. We just, that was just because we love Beth and we admire her for her journey to Orthodoxy, along with the love of her husband and his enthusiasm and the extended family. So that's really where this comes from. And if you were here last week, we were blessed with another young lady who spoke so beautifully. And tonight we have Beth. Next week we have Michelle Kuhn, who's also, her husband is a Moritakis. So you guys all have to come back now next week. And then please be supportive of our last speaker. You don't know her as well, but her name is Michelle Tversky, and she's a young adult also. And we'd love to hear her too. So the other thing I wanted to share with you is that, don't forget now, it's hard to believe that we're already in the 4th week of Great Lent. So we're progressing quickly. I do want to thank Jenny and Tanasi and all the nice people that prepared and served. We have taken Lenten Chinese culinary lessons. So that's what we had this evening. It was so wonderful. I got a second helping of coleslaw because I really like that. And it's card free. So without further ado, I'd like to all of us to welcome Beth Moritakis.
Good evening. I would like to say thank you guys for, do you need me to bring it down?
Yeah, close to you.
Is that better?
Yeah.
All right. Good evening, Parish family. I'd like to thank all of y'all for taking time out of your busy week to be here this evening. So it's very humbling to have been asked to be a part of this. And honestly, when I got Father Christos' response, I kind of sat in my desk chair and had a little gut-wrenching feeling, knowing that I was probably going to have a lot of my in-laws here tonight and new friends that I've made and strangers as well. But really and truly, you're all kind of strangers to me because not a lot of you know my story and my background. And I just appreciate you allowing me the opportunity to be a little vulnerable with you this evening. Because when he asked me to share my story, I kept thinking, well, my story is a little dark. My story's got some mess to it. My story is complicated. But when you really think about what my story is God's story. And without the trials and tribulations that I've been through in my life, I wouldn't be able to be in such appreciation for the way in which God has worked through my life. So to give you a little bit of background as to where I've come from, I was a preacher's kid. And you would think that being a preacher's kid, I grew up in a very wholesome and loving and understanding atmosphere. And my life was kind of anything but that. There was a lot of shame, there was a lot of guilt, there was some abuse, and there was some abandonment. And, the first 20 years of my life was the hardest and the darkest time of my life because before my 5th birthday, I lost my best friend, who was my little sister. We were a little over a year apart and we were 2 peas in a pod, and she passed away in a drowning accident. And so I carried a lot of guilt for that all through my childhood. And a deep loneliness really started at that point because my older sister was 5 years older than me, and my father was previously married before my parents were married. So he had 2 boys and they lived across country. So I didn't have a close relationship with them at the time. And it was just me and Caroline. And so when she passed away, it was a hard time in my life. And my father's response to that to my mother was not a consoling type of relationship. It was her fault, as if he had nothing to do with it. But she was the last one in the house. And so it was just an interesting way in which he carried out our family after that. And so she needed to replace my little sister that passed away, and she did. So we had my little sister who's now born now. And the first 6 months of her life, she was very sick, and we didn't know what was wrong with her. And 3 of those 6 months were spent in the hospital. And they finally diagnosed her with cystic fibrosis. And if you don't know what that is, it's a fatal respiratory disease. So now here we've lost a sibling, and we have a sibling that's got a fatal disease. So that just caused more chaos and turmoil in a family that was not held together very well. And as I mentioned, my father was a preacher. And so even though he was in ministry, he kind of used that as a power tool, and a lot of control and manipulation happened behind closed doors. So what I saw and what my view of church was very jaded, because I saw one man at church being this very godly man and could recite scripture and would put his hands on people and pray to people. And then I'd see another man totally different at home. And so I was very conflicted as to what a relationship with Christ was at a very young age. And so as Sarah Ann, we started figuring out she had to take 40 doses of medicine a day. And as a baby, that's kind of impossible. And so she had to have a GI tube in which she got all of her food and nutrition. And it caused my mom to start sleeping in the room with her. And just to make sure that she was getting, it had to be at certain times, and to make sure she didn't strangle on the cords as well. So my father was then not getting attention, and who was the person next in line to be getting attention? And that was me, because my older sister wasn't around. And I didn't realize the things that were being done to me were wrong until I was older in life and saw a Hallmark video, and I was like, oh, that's not supposed to be happening with my relationship with my father. And, you know, my father being such a controlling and manipulative person that he was, I knew I couldn't go to my mom, because my mom wasn't allowed to work. My mom was told what she could wear, how she could cut her hair. So I'm like, what is she gonna do? You know, she can't stand up for me. So it was what it was. And it finally got to the point where my mom had really just had enough. And so by the age of 10, my parents divorced, and it was a nasty divorce. Like, I saw things for 2 years of my life that no 12, 11 or 10, 11, 12-year-old should ever have to go through and witness. And so I was forced to grow up pretty quickly. And luckily my mom met my stepfather at that time, and I finally started seeing some stability and understanding what love kind of actually was. And so we moved, and I finally went to one middle school. I had been to 5 elementary schools prior to this, because my father could never hold down a job, and it was constantly robbing Peter to pay Paul. We've lived in cars, we lived in people's basements, we've had hand-me-downs. Like, it was, to the age of 13, it was not a glorious life at all. And so here steps my stepfather, and just really embraces my sisters and I. And we were never his stepdaughters. We were always his daughters. And he really tried to mend the relationship that we had growing up. Well, kind of fast forward to that, to my junior year in high school. My dad was actually starting to become more of a dad after the divorce. I saw a softer side of him. I saw a more vulnerable side of him, because he literally had lost everything in losing his kids and whatever. You know, it was just, I just appreciated the man that he had become after the divorce. But it did come to an October day, my junior year, and we got some incredible news that my father had taken his life, and he had drowned himself. And so when we got the police report, we learned that he was wearing what he wore when he baptized my little sister and I. So I don't know what, you know, your thoughts are on suicide. I can say that I've definitely struggled with what suicide is for many years of my life. And I've, for certain times, thought that my father was rotting in hell. But as I've kind of gone through therapy and worked through things, and understanding, coming to Orthodoxy and what the sacrament of baptism is, I truly feel like he was trying to baptize himself in that moment. And that's how I've had to have peace with it. So after the loss of my father, shortly after that, my stepfather's cancer came out of remission. And so for the next 2 years after that, we pretty much watched my stepfather wither away. And so he passes away a little over 2 years from my father passing away. So here I am, 19, 3 deaths in my life. And my mother has always had a battle with prescription pills. And as you can imagine, losing a child, now losing a husband, dealing with a child that's got a fatal disease who's now 13, she was just checked out, and would be asleep for days on end. So me being the only one left at home, I'm trying to step up and take care of my little sister and make sure she gets her meds and make sure she's going to school. And all I'm hearing is, you're not my mother. I don't have to listen to you. You're not her mother. She doesn't have to listen to you. And excuse me, fathers, I was like, okay, screw you guys. I'm out of here. If I can't help you, then I've got to grieve too through this part of my life. And at the time, my older sister lived in San Diego, and she was like, why don't you just come out here for the summer? You can go back to school in the fall and just kind of get away from it for a little bit. And so that's what I did. And a summer trip turned into a 4-year journey to San Diego. I transferred college, and it came to my senior year, because as something that my father, one of the reasons why I guess he made the decision he made is because he felt like his children were going to be better off without him. And this large sum of money was just going to magically replace him. Well, at 19 years old, you have no idea what you're to do with a large sum of money. And at that point in my life, I wanted to do nothing but be numb. And so I made very poor life decisions and wanted to be numb myself. And so, it was what it was. I did definitely enjoy a nice chapter in San Diego. I made great friends, but it got to the point where instead of using the money for education like I should have, I was like, let's take out student loans. That's a great idea. And so my senior year, I either dropped out to Ford in San Diego or I came home to finish. And so I came home to finish because I refused to live my mother's life. I refused for a man to tell me that I couldn't work. I couldn't do something. I couldn't go buy something if I wanted to go buy something. So I was the first woman to graduate from college in my family, and I was very proud of that. Had a job, had 2 jobs actually, because it was a time where I either pay rent or I pay student loans, pay rent, pay student loans. And so as I was working my second job, I was working as a cocktail waitress, and there was a gentleman that I started to date through that I met at this job. And he was a doctor. And so, oh, wow, okay, I've hit the jackpot. I'm not going to live my life that I grew up living. And so the trips were very wonderful. The gifts were wonderful. And the first few years of the relationship were just absolutely like, this is amazing. But my family was kind of like, I don't know about this guy. And I'm like, no, you guys are wrong. You're totally wrong. Well, he of course didn't like the fact that I cocktailed and I was gone in the evenings. And he was like, well, why don't you just move in with me? All right, well, that seems like a good idea. We're kind of moving in that direction. So I sell everything that I had earned and worked for at this point and move in with somebody. So I have my clothes. Well, then I start really seeing the side of this man that he wasn't presenting to me prior to me moving in with him. And it became, he knew how I felt about prescription pills because of things that I've been through with my mother. So he hid the fact that he had an addiction to pain pills, and what I thought was creatine he was taking, it was steroids. And so the abuse, the physical abuse started, and that started getting, the mental abuse was already there. The spiritual abuse was there because he was Jewish, and I was asking, can we start introducing church? Can we start investigating this? Because I was crying out for something. I was so broken and so down at this point. I was like, this can't be the life that you have in store for me. And I had reached out. We were living in Duluth at the time, and that's where one of the churches that my father had helped start was. So I reached out to my youth pastor and I'm like, is there anywhere here that I can go in Duluth? And he was like, I'm so sorry. I live in Calhoun now. I don't know of anything. And through another friend, I was working a job, but I was doing contract work. So I was getting paid lump sums random times. So there was no way. I'd become so financially dependent on this person. I couldn't leave. And I had no idea what I could do. I was like, here I am. I've worked so hard to not be my mom, and I'm right into the same situation and been attracted to this negativity. And now I'm being manipulated and abused again, all over again. And so I was fortunate enough to get a design job, and through that, I met a lovely young lady, and she was like, why don't you come to my church and check it out? And as Father Paul mentioned this past Sunday, 80% of people coming to a church needs to come from us. It's not going to come from the fathers or the preachers asking us to come. And her extending that invite to me absolutely changed my life, because Lily Giglio shared a message that day, and I'd been praying. I'm like, God, please tell me you're hearing my prayers and what I'm crying out for you. Like something's got to happen. And there was this one sermon that he was giving, and I was in hundreds of people trying to silently sob. Like, he's so talking to me right now. Like, this is what I needed to hear. And so shortly after that, I had gotten involved with some charity work because of cystic fibrosis, and I had this gentleman had become a part of my life, and truly was a true guardian angel that had come. And we were having lunch one day, and he just stopped me in the middle of my conversation, and he was like, "What's going on with you?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about? Like, everything's fine. I'm not in a bad spot." He was like, "What's going on with you?" And I just immediately started falling into tears at lunch that day. And from that point on, he was like, "What do we need to do to get you out of this situation?" And so that is when I was introduced to a new career, because my career that I was in was not going to provide me what I needed to get out of this situation. And at that point in my life, I had never had somebody believe in me and see something in me that I didn't see in myself. And I was so uncomfortable. I was completely I'm like, "You want me to be in sales? Like, you want me to go and get in front of a group of people and sell beer? Like, okay, I know nothing of this." And so here I am, and we're sitting around the kitchen table, and he's teaching me numbers, and he was like, "You're not going to fail. I'm not going to let you fail." And that, because of that opportunity, I wouldn't be in front of you tonight without that confidence that career move made for me. And I wouldn't have my husband a part of my life either because of that one decision. So the fact that this person gave something, a stranger, he didn't have to do anything for me. And he saw something important to me and gave to me. And so I gradually succeeded in this job. It moved me to Charlotte. I succeeded there. It moved me back to Atlanta. And that's when Peter entered into my life. And Peter entering into my life introduced me to Orthodoxy. And as our relationship progressed, and I eventually came to some family events, and this is almost as intimidating as actually coming to Mark's house for the first time and having 50 Greeks saying Christos Anesti, and I'm like, what do I say? But that day was what really showed me what Orthodoxy and family is about, because of those two matriarchs sitting at that table right there, Aunt Effie and Aunt Joanne. Y'all would not let me leave the table. You embraced me, you loved me, you knew nothing of me. And the fact that there was so much love around me in that day, and the fact that you all are here now, like, I don't even have blood family here, and y'all are here loving me and supporting me. I can't tell you how much that means to me. And so as I started expressing my interest in knowing more about this faith and what this faith truly was, I started seeing that Orthodoxy, it provided a structure that I had not had ever in my life. My life was so chaotic, and it gave me, Orthodoxy offers consistency that, to me, the consistency of everything. And in the sermons, it's the consistency of God's love for us. It doesn't give up. It's always there. And, my speech tonight is He's loved me the same today as He loved me in my darkest days when I made the poorest decisions. And so just the time-honored values and traditions that we have, that was something that was so important to me, even before I met Peter, is I want to create culture in my family. I want to create traditions that are happy and healthy, that my kids want to continue to pass on and carry on. And so, I just have to, I'll finish with this, and it's from 2 Corinthians. It's a scripture of, and of course, I'm not going to be able to find it, even though I bookmarked it, right? It's 2 Corinthians 4, verses 7 through 12. "But we have this treasure in jars of clay, to show us the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying in the body of the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may be manifested in our bodies. For we who live and always be given being given over the death of Jesus' sake, so that the life of Jesus may be manifested in the moral flesh. And as I kind of dove into this scripture and read more about it, the essence of us being jars of clay is made of the earth. God made Adam and Eve out of the earth, out of the dust of the earth. Clay is molded, and throughout my life, he's molded me and shaped me and reshaped me. And clay is fragile as well. And us as humans can be very fragile and weak. So even though I've been bumped and I've got cracks, I've been dropped, but I've never been shattered. And I think the grace of God that he hasn't shattered me. So even though I stand here in front of you with some cracks and holes in it, I hope that his light is shined out through that, because it's with the glory of God that I am truly here, and the relationship that I've built with him over the past decade, and just truly getting to know him, because it's a relationship. If you don't give into him, he's not going to receive it back to you. And truly being open to hearing him. I don't know why I was used tonight to be in this very uncomfortable situation and to share my story and be very vulnerable, but for whatever reason, he wanted me to be here, and this was his timing. And I really thank you again for letting me be vulnerable with y'all, especially during such a cherished time of year it is for us Christians. And I look forward to going into Holy Week and just continuing to celebrate this with you guys. So thank you.
Stay here a moment. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. Anything you'd like to ask Beth? There's one right here, Dr. Vic.
You don't have to answer this unless you want to, but how would you know?
I am so thankful you asked, actually. The research for cystic fibrosis has come tremendous leaps and bounds over the past few years. And on April 20th, we are actually celebrating her 32nd birthday, which is double her life expectancy. So,
Have you thought much about how we can evangelize America?
love.
Yeah.
This right here, love and support for strangers, and wanting to can pour in them. You don't know who somebody's story is, and you may see somebody that is having an awful day and just smile at them, because you have no idea what they're going through. That's the only thing I can think of, is just love more.
Okay, anyone else?
Good.
Have something for you.
So we want to say, of course, thank you, Beth, for opening up and sharing you have courage that a lot of us may not have shared this evening. And I just want to acknowledge that fact that your courage gives us courage as well. So I'm going to look to you as an example of what it's like to be vulnerable and to be able to say, look, stand up in front of friends, family, and people that I may not know and give something of myself to them. So I want to say thank you for that.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Of course.
It's a little icon of the Annunciation.
Thank you again.
What a blessing it is. Really, we're so blessed in this beautiful community. One of the things that we're striving to do after coming out of 2 years of somewhat loneliness is to get back together. And so we're purposely trying to design some of the programs we had before, but even trying to enhance them as much as we can, because we need this. We need to be together. Orthodoxy in particular, and any faith really you cannot live in isolation unless you're a hermit in the desert. And even then, people come to you and visit you and so on. So we need each other, and we need this beautiful fellowship. And so that's like Father said, thank you, because I don't know, I just feel like now we're even more part of your family because we know you even better. This is such a wonderful thing. So thank you for opening up your heart tonight to us. So did everybody get dessert? No, come on, help yourselves to dessert. And if you can help us be good stewards, clean up your places on the tables for us. That'll be very helpful. And everyone online, we thank you for watching tonight. God bless you, and we hope to see you again soon, next week or sooner.